Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus Podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. If you've noticed that the audio volume level for this episode is lower than for previous episodes of this podcast, that is by design, as starting with this episode, I'm editing episodes to a lower maximum volume level. With that out of the way, for this episode, my interview guest is an acquisitions editor for Morgan James Publishing. Additionally, he is the author of multiple nonfiction books, including biographies about Sojourner Truth and the Reverend Billy Graham, as well as multiple books about or otherwise related to book publishing. His name is W. Terry Whalin, and my interview with Terry will follow the note-taking sounds. Terry Whalin, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus Podcast.
Aaron, wonderful to be here with you. Appreciate the opportunity.
The first couple of questions I have are about your work for Morgan James Publishing, and I've interviewed several authors from Morgan James for this podcast, but you're an acquisitions editor for them. What responsibilities does an acquisitions editor at a publishing company have, and what is your job like?
Yeah, Aaron, that's a really great question. An acquisitions editor, I'll usually explain it. We're a hunter and a gatherer. I'm often the very first person to see a submission from an author in the publishing house. I've been with the company now for 12 years, and this is actually the third publisher that I'm working for in the acquisitions area. So I look at the book, I look at the background of the author. I set up a meeting with the author to physically talk to them, see if they're really a good fit for what Morgan James does. And then if so, I pitch them and their book to my colleagues at the publication board, see if I can get a contract for them. When I get a contract, I send it to them, and then I negotiate the contract with them until they sign. And once they sign, I sort of hand them off to my colleagues who work with them on the production part for the book.
How does an acquisitions editor differ from a developmental editor? Because there may be some people who confuse the two.
Yeah, that's right. A developmental editor is somebody who takes a look at a manuscript and helps you develop that, add more stories, lengthen it, cut it until it's the appropriate length, really develop the book. Where an acquisitions editor is really more on the front end of things. We're more of a, is this a good book that our company should publish or not? And if not, we're going to pass. So we don't really work on critiquing it or figuring out what should be fixed. It's more of a yes-no type of relationship.
What do you love most about working for Morgan James Publishing?
What I love most, Aaron, is that we do a wide variety of books. We do some Christian books, so I love those. I've written a number of Christian books like that. We do children's books. I've published more than a dozen children's books, so I have a heart for that. We do some fiction. I've never written fiction. I've written some short stories, but I've never written like full-length fiction books. But I enjoy reading those and working with those authors. And then the bulk of what we do at Morgan James is really in the nonfiction trade area. So we do business, self-help, how-to, all kinds of books like that. So, we're publishing close to 200 books a year, Aaron. So there's a lot of material going through the publishing house all the time.
You've authored numerous books, including biographies about historical figures as varied as the late Reverend Billy Graham and the late abolitionist Sojourner Truth, as well as nonfiction books about or related to book publishing, among others. Without spoiling too much about the books you've authored, what are some of your more popular books about?
Yeah, I would say some of my more popular books are some of these biographies, for example, that I've written about Sojourner Truth and Samuel Morris, Billy Graham, Luis Palau, people like that. But then also the nonfiction books that I've written have sold a lot of copies. I wrote a diet book, Aaron, years ago that I wrote in about 17 days for a publisher. Most diet books, you can imagine, they're published in January. People make New Year's resolutions. They go out and buy a diet book. And so this publisher really wanted this book to come out in January. And so I flew down to Houston. I met with Carol Lewis. She was the founder of this ministry down there at First Baptist Houston called First Place. And this book is actually their foundational book that they give to people. They run in churches all over the country, and they've sold over 100,000 copies of this book through the years. My name's on the cover of all of them, but I was a hired gun from the publisher. So my responsibility was to write the book in a short amount of time, get it turned in. And so that book is one of the books that I've done over the years.
Could you elaborate more? I think there's a couple of books that you've written that are either about or related to book publishing in some way that you've written.
Sure, I have. I've written several of those. I did a book a number of years ago called Jumpstart Your Publishing Dreams, Inside Secrets to Help Every Author Succeed. And that book is really one that came from my blog entries that I've done over the years. And so it's a lot of work to take blog entries and make those into a book, but I did that. Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, wrote the foreword for that book. And then I've also done a book that I wrote as a frustrated acquisitions editor. The very first publisher that I was with, I wasn't getting the type of submissions from authors needed in order to be able to get them a book contract. So out of my own frustration, Aaron, I wrote this book called Book Proposals That Sell, 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. The book has over 150 five-star reviews. It's been well received. People have used it to get a publisher, find a literary agent, get an advance. All kinds of great things have happened from that book. But publishing has changed a lot through the years. So a few years ago, I wrote a revised edition of this book that's out there, Book Proposals That Sell. And your listeners can get that ebook version of that book, the whole book, from me for free if they go to bookproposals.ws, bookproposals.ws. And if you go over there, you'll see there's a cover and a little copy about the book and a big button that says free book. And the reason I give that book away, Aaron, is because at Morgan James, we've pretty much proven that if you get that ebook from me and you start to read that ebook, there is a high probability that you're going to turn and buy the print copy of the book. So giving away that free ebook, even the whole book, I lose nothing in that process. I actually am driving print book sales by doing that. You know, when ebooks came out here, and we thought they were going to take over print and print was going to disappear. Well, that's not going to happen because worldwide, they've pretty much proven that it's 80% print and 20% ebook. So our print books are not going to disappear. We don't have to worry about that.
What was your wake-up moment as an author, and can you tell our listeners more about that? Was that plane ride to Houston for a book publishing related matter, or was it something else?
No, it was really something else. I was a literary agent for a while. I had a small literary agency in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, invited me out to Los Angeles. He was having this event called Mega Book Marketing University. Now, at that point in my life, Aaron, I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers. Publishers were making pretty books. They were putting my books in the bookstore. They were paying me advances on those books. All kinds of great things were happening. But when you're in that traditional publishing mode, what happens is once a year or maybe quarterly, the publisher will send you a financial statement, show you how your book is doing. Well, I would get my statements back then, and all of them were in the minus category. They weren't making money. They weren't making their advance back. They weren't making any additional money. And I really couldn't figure out I must have been doing something wrong, but I really couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. So while I was at Mega Book Marketing University, I sat there with all 400 of the people that were there and listened to the different speakers. One of the speakers at that event was Jack Canfield, the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul. And Jack has this book called The Success Principles. And I have a copy here on my shelf. It really talks about what does it take to be successful. Well, the very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take 100% responsibility. We want somebody else to do it, our publisher, our agent, our marketing person, please, somebody other than us. But during that event, I decided to take 100% responsibility for my own success. And it was almost like I woke up because I realized how little I was personally doing to be telling people about my book. Sure, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I was doing almost nothing else. And, even these Chicken Soup for the Soul authors, Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield, they talk about how they were rejected for that series of books over 160 times. I mean, that's a lot of rejection, and they finally found somebody out there to publish their book in Florida, this little publisher that published the first Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Now, they told their publisher they were going to sell 1 million books in the first year. Well, their publisher laughed at them because they'd never sold 1 million copies of anything at that point in time. It took them 1.5 years, Aaron. And the way they did it is what they talked about. They talked about following what they call the rule of 5. They got up every day and they did 5 things to be telling people about their book. They did a radio interview, a live event, a book signing, a guest blog post, a magazine article, 5 different things every day in order to be telling people about their book. And that's really the kind of work that we as authors have to be doing to be telling people about our book, because they've pretty much proven out there that somebody has to hear about your book, 8, 9, 10, a dozen times before they say, oh, that book proposes that sell book. That sounds like a book that I should buy. Or, oh, that Jumpstart Your Publishing Dreams book by Terry Whalin. That sounds like a book that I should get. So you have to hear about these books over and over before you actually decide to do something about them. And, the messages you put out shouldn't be just things like buy my book, because nobody cares about that. But what you really need to be telling people is what are the benefits? What are they going to gain by reading your book? So I started blogging. I started a blog in like 2004. I'm blogging once a week. And, my blog, Aaron, now has over 1,700 entries in it. And I have this little thing that searches for my name out there online if it finds it. And about a year ago, I found this article on the top 27 content producers out there. Now, they say in this article, there's over 600 million blogs that are out there, but they listed me as one of the top 27 content producers, along with Seth Godin and Ryan Holiday and Jeff Goins, people like that. And it's not that I'm doing anything magical in that process, but I am consistent in that I blog every single week. And, people read it and they get a lot out of it. And so I'm very glad, but that's the kind of persistent action that every author really needs to take in order to be successful with their book.
Did Morgan James publish all of the books you've authored, or have some books been published through other publishers?
Oh, I've been published by all kinds of publishers out there. I've been published by St. Martin's Press, Zondervan, Thomas Nelson, Moody, Tyndale, Bethany House, Broadman and Holman, a whole bunch of different publishers that I've worked with through the years, not just Morgan James.
Now, as you're an acquisitions editor, not a developmental, an acquisitions editor at Morgan James Publishing, what are some books other than ones you've written or co-written that you've been an editor for?
Oh boy, there's a huge list of them, but I've done anything from children's books to how-to books to novels. We published a Christie Award winner actually that was, it's been out of print for a number of years, that we just published from Morgan James by Rosie Dow about the Scopes monkey trial. It's a historical fiction book. So I've done all different kinds of books through the years that I've worked on at Morgan James. I mean, the titles all kind of blur after a while, so it's not like I can come up with a whole bunch of them for you.
In addition to your work as an author and acquisitions editor, you've written numerous magazine articles for both Christian magazines and general market magazines, from what I understand. What are some of the more notable magazines you've written articles for, and what topics have you written magazine articles about?
Oh, I've written for more than 50 magazines through the years. I've been a magazine editor. I've written personal experience stories. I've written how-to articles. I've written profiles. I've actually profiled more than 150 best-selling authors through the years. Crazy thing about the magazine business is that sometimes these magazines are there for a season, and then because of the expense of producing these magazines, they go out of print and they're not around anymore. But I've written for Christianity Today. I've written for Moody Monthly, which doesn't exist anymore, but lots of magazines like that. I was the founding book review editor at Christian Parenting Today, another magazine that was out there. The thing I like about magazine articles, Aaron, is that they're short. Books are long, books are 50 to 100,000 words to write a book. But a magazine article you can write in maybe 1,000, 1,500 words. And, if you sell 5,000 copies of your book during the lifetime of the book, that's a good number in the book sales. In the magazine area, it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000, more than 1 million people. I mean, back when I was working at Decision Magazine, which is with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, we were doing 1.8 million copies of the magazine every issue. So you can really reach a lot more people with a magazine article. And as a writer, I always encourage people to write for magazines because you can learn a lot working in that short form. So you can learn how to write a good headline, which would be a good title for your book. You can learn how to have a good start, good middle, good ending, write to a single point, write for a particular audience. I mean, there's a lot of inside things that you learn in that writing for magazine experience. And Aaron, if you write on a similar kind of topic, and let's say you do it 12, 15, 20 times, those different magazine articles could become chapters of your book. So it's all a matter of looking at your stuff in the kind of the right way and creatively and saying, now, how can I use this more in other places? And so I always encourage people to do that kind of thing.
What is the most important attribute to becoming a successful author, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think one of the most important attributes that you have to have as an author is passion. And that's because, you as the author have the greatest desire and passion for people to know about your book and be able to get it out there. And I mean, let's face it, a publisher is divided in their attention because, like at Morgan James, we're doing 200 books a year. I mean, we're divided on that passion that we have. Sure, we're passionate about your book, but we're not as passionate as the author. So you as the author have to take that passion and use that to really persevere and get up every day and figure out what you're going to do to be telling people about your book. And there's so much, Aaron, in the publishing process that's really outside of our control as an author. So I wrote 10 publishing myths as to really help authors in a practical kind of way to understand that there are practical things that they can do as an author to be able to get out there and sell books. So that book, I want people to get that book. If they go to publishingoffer.com, that's publishingoffer.com, that'll take you to a website where they can get 10 publishing myths, the print copy from me, for only $10, along with over $200 worth of bonuses. And what I tried to do in 10 publishing myths is give every author practical information of things that they can actually do to succeed with their book. Because I'll talk to authors all the time, Aaron, and they'll tell me, well, my audience is over on LinkedIn, or my audience is on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Well, those are great platforms, don't get me wrong. But in the business, we call those rented platforms because, hey, I don't control Facebook. I don't control YouTube. As a matter of fact, I could knowingly or unknowingly violate their terms, and I could get kicked off of those places tomorrow. So as an author, you want to think about that when you build your audience. You want to build your audience on your own blog, your own website, your own email list, because those are things that you can actually control and you can actually do something with. So you want to take that passion of yours and really channel that in a way that really helps you reach the most people out there with your work.
Terry, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an wonderful guest to interview.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I really do appreciate the opportunity. And, when I put that 10 publishing myths book together, Aaron, Alice Kreider, who's another acquisitions editor, when she sent me her endorsement, she said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, okay, Alice, I'll bite. What's the 11th myth? She said, well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah Winfrey, she'll book me on her show. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a pretty good myth. And so what I decided to do, Aaron, is I decided to write that chapter. And when we designed the book, we designed that chapter to look exactly like the rest of the book. And I give that chapter away to people free because I want you to see what that looks like. So if they go to terrylinks.com/11th myth, 11th myth, that'll take you to a little website of mine, and you can put your first name and email address in, and then you can get that 11th myth chapter from me completely free.
Terry was kind enough to send me an autographed copy of his book, 10 Publishing Myths, after I interviewed him, and I thank him very much for doing so. If anyone has any questions or concerns about the audio level of this episode, feel free to let me know, either in a comment if you're listening to this episode on Spotify or YouTube, or regardless of which platform you're using to stream the podcast, via email to apollopapyrus@outlook.com. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.